The rain fell on Arlington in a relentless, gray sheet, as if the very sky were mourning. Captain Mark Rourke stood at rigid attention, his dress blue uniform a stark, formal contrast to the raw grief clawing at his insides. Each drop that soaked into his short-cropped hair, each trickle of cold water down his neck, was a separate, tiny punishment. He barely felt them. Before him, the flag-draped casket held the remains of Sergeant Liam Walsh, his friend, his brother in everything but blood. The chaplain's words were a distant hum, lost to the roar of memory in Mark's ears. Liam, with his easy grin and a joke for every hellish situation. Liam, who had talked about his 3 sisters with a mixture of fierce pride and exasperated fondness. "My 3 graces, Cap," he'd say, staring at a cracked photo in the dust of some forgotten outpost. "Though God knows they're more like furies, especially Elara. She's got a spine of steel, that one. Runs the whole show since, well, you know." Mark did know. He knew about the car accident that had orphaned them years ago, leaving Elara, barely 18, to become mother, father, and CEO of the chaotic Walsh household. He knew Liam sent home most of his pay, and he knew the guilt his friend carried for not being there. The sharp, precise crack of the rifle salute jolted him back to the present. He watched as the flag was folded with ritualistic care, the blue and white stars pressed into a tight triangle. A senior officer approached, not with the usual intention of presenting it to a spouse or a parent, but to him. "Captain Rourke," the colonel said, his voice low and gravelly. "Liam's will was very specific. You're named as the sole executor of his estate and the legal guardian of his sisters until the youngest comes of age." Mark's breath hitched. He'd known this was coming, had signed the papers Liam had shoved at him with a laugh and a, "Just a formality. Cap, look after my girls if I buy the farm, yeah?" It had felt like a morbid joke then. Now it was a crushing reality. "Yes, sir," Mark replied, his voice a hoarse whisper. He took the flag. It was heavier than it looked. "The eldest, Elara," the colonel continued, his tone shifting to one of caution. "She's contested the guardianship, filed a petition with the family court. She wants full custody of her sisters." Mark's jaw tightened. He gave a curt nod. He hadn't expected anything less. The Walsh house was a 2-story Victorian on a street of neatly manicured lawns, but this one had an air of defiant wildness. The garden was overgrown, a rose bush wrestling with weeds, and a brightly painted bicycle lay on its side on the path. It was a home, not just a house, but one held together by sheer force of will. He rang the bell, the flag tucked under his arm, a shield and a burden. The door swung open to reveal a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 24, but her eyes held a century's worth of weariness. Elara Walsh. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy but functional ponytail, and she wore paint-stained jeans and a faded sweatshirt. She was beautiful in a way that was sharp and entirely unyielding. Her gaze flickered from his face to the flag in his hands, and her expression, already guarded, turned to stone. "Captain Rourke," she said, her voice cool and flat. It wasn't a question. "Ms. Walsh, Elara, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Are you?" She didn't move to let him in. "Because from where I'm standing, you're the man who came back when my brother didn't. And now you're here to what? Take over." "Liam asked me to look after you," Mark said, keeping his own voice even with an effort that strained every muscle in his body. This was a battlefield of a different kind. "We don't need looking after. We've been managing just fine." Her chin lifted. "I've been managing just fine. For 7 years. I know you have, but Liam's will is clear. I'm your legal guardian until Chloe turns 18. A flash of pure, undiluted fury ignited in her green eyes. "Legal guardian? You're a soldier. You don't know the first thing about us. About raising teenage girls. I know about duty, and I made a promise." Their staring contest was interrupted by the appearance of 2 other girls in the hallway behind Elara. The middle sister, Maya, 17, with Liam's same mischievous eyes but currently red-rimmed from crying, hovered nervously. The youngest, Chloe, 14, stared at him with a blend of curiosity and hostility, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Is he moving in?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling slightly. Elara's gaze never left Mark's. "We'll see about that." The following week was a cold war fought over breakfast cereal and laundry schedules. Mark had taken a leave of absence from his unit and moved into Liam's old room, a space that still smelled faintly of his friend. It was a shrine, and Mark felt like an intruder. His life had been governed by order, discipline, and a clear chain of command. The Walsh household was a benevolent anarchy, orchestrated entirely by Elara. He tried to impose structure. A chore chart was met with derision. A suggested curfew for Maya was countered with a detailed list of her academic and extracurricular achievements, implying his input was not only unnecessary but ignorant. Chloe simply ignored him, retreating to her room with her headphones on. The epicenter of the conflict, however, was the finances. "You can't keep draining your savings to pay the mortgage," Mark said one evening, standing in the doorway of the small home office Elara had commandeered. Bills were spread across the desk like a paper battlefield. Elara didn't look up from her laptop. "I've been paying the mortgage since I was 19. I think I can handle it." Liam left a life insurance policy, a substantial one. "It's meant for this, for you, for your education." Her fingers stilled on the keyboard. "I'm not touching that money." "Why?" "It's what he wanted." She finally turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Because that money is blood money, Captain. It's the price the government put on my brother's life. Taking it feels like cashing a check for his death. I won't do it. I'd rather work 3 jobs." Mark was stunned into silence. He saw it then, the depth of her pain, so expertly concealed beneath a layer of bristling control. Her refusal was not just stubbornness. It was a monument to her grief, a twisted form of loyalty. "Elara," he began, his voice softer. "Don't," she cut him off, turning back to her screen. "Just don't. The bills are my concern. You concern yourself with whatever it is you think you're doing here." Defeated, he retreated. He was a decorated officer, a leader of men in combat zones, yet he was being systematically dismantled by a 24-year-old artist and her sisters. Later that night, he found Maya in the kitchen, foraging for a late-night snack. "She's not always like this, you know," Maya said quietly, without him asking. She was the peacemaker, the observer. Before, she used to laugh. She painted these huge, beautiful, messy canvases. Now she just works her graphic design job and fights with everyone. "She's carrying a lot," Mark conceded, leaning against the counter. "She's been carrying it all," Maya corrected gently. "You showing up with your rules and your flag. It feels like you're saying she didn't do a good job, that she failed." The insight hit its mark. He had been focusing on the challenge to his authority, but he hadn't considered the indictment of hers. The first major crisis arrived on a Friday night. Chloe, the quiet one, was the one who exploded. It started with a slammed door and ended with Elara and Mark standing on the front porch, staring at the empty, dark street. "She's 14. Where could she have gone?" Elara's voice was shrill with a panic she rarely showed. All her control had evaporated. "Did you have a fight?" Mark asked, his mind already switching to tactical mode, assessing the terrain, the time, the possible destinations. "What does it matter? We have to find her." She was clutching her phone, her fingers shaking too much to dial properly. "Elara, breathe." Mark's command voice, honed in life or death situations, cut through her hysteria. "Tell me what happened." She took a ragged breath. She wanted to go to some party, a senior party. I said no. She said I was suffocating her, that I wasn't our mother, that I was just a miserable control freak who wanted everyone to be as miserable as me. The words tumbled out, laced with a fresh, new pain. And then she just ran. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. It was the first time he'd initiated physical contact, and she flinched, but didn't pull away. "We'll find her. You check with her friends. Call them. I'll take the car and check the park, the diner, anywhere she might go to cool off." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just nodded, her eyes wide and scared. An hour later, Mark found Chloe. She wasn't at a party. She was sitting alone on the swings in the deserted elementary school playground, shivering in the cold, her face streaked with tears. She looked impossibly young. He didn't say anything. He just sat on the swing next to hers, the chains groaning in protest under his weight. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the creak of the chains and the distant hum of traffic. "She hates me," Chloe finally whispered. "No," Mark said, his voice low and steady. "She's terrified of losing you. It's the same thing, but it feels different. She doesn't understand. It's so hard. At school, everyone has parents, and I have a sister who acts like one. And now a soldier." She kicked at the wood chips beneath her feet. "It's just a lot." "I know," he said, and for the first time he felt like he truly did. "But running towards trouble isn't the answer. It just gives the people who love you more things to worry about." "Is that a military thing?" "It's a human thing," he said. "Come on. Your sister is scared out of her mind. Let's go home." When they walked through the front door, Elara was waiting, her face pale. She rushed to Chloe, and instead of the lecture Mark expected, she simply pulled her into a tight, silent hug. Over Chloe's head, Elara's eyes met Mark's. There was no smile, no words of thanks, but the defiant wall in her gaze had a new crack in it, a flicker of something that looked like acknowledgement. The turning point came from an unexpected direction: Maya's future. A letter arrived from a prestigious summer art program in New York. She'd been accepted with a partial scholarship, but the remaining cost was prohibitive. "It's fine," Maya said, trying to sound cheerful as she placed the letter on the kitchen table. "It was a long shot anyway." "Nonsense," Elara said immediately, already pulling out her laptop. "We'll make it work. I can take on more freelance projects." "You're already working yourself to the bone," Mark said, watching her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the constant tension in her shoulders. "It's not your problem," she retorted, but the usual heat was gone. That night, Mark did what he should have done from the beginning. He didn't issue a decree. He convened a meeting, all four of them at the kitchen table. "We're a family unit now," he began, his voice quieter, less authoritative than before. "That means we make decisions together. Starting with this." He pointed to the acceptance letter. "Maya, this is an incredible opportunity. We're going to find a way." "How?" Elara asked, but it was a genuine question, not a challenge. "We use Liam's insurance money," Mark said, holding up a hand to stop her immediate protest. "Hear me out, Elara. That money isn't payment for his death. It's a gift from him. It's his final deployment, his last mission. To take care of you. To give Maya this chance. To take the pressure off you so you can breathe again. Denying it is denying him the chance to provide for his family one last time." The room was silent. Elara stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. He had reframed the entire argument, and she had no defense against it. "He would have wanted this," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He was always telling me to shoot for the stars, Elara. You know he was." Chloe, from her corner, added a quiet, "Yeah." Elara looked from one face to another. She saw the hope in Maya's eyes, the tentative support in Chloe's, and the steady, unwavering conviction in Mark's. The fortress of her resistance finally crumbled. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, and she made no move to wipe it away. "Okay," she whispered, the word a surrender and a liberation. "Okay, we'll use the money." It was a victory, but it didn't feel like one for Mark. Felt like a beginning. In the weeks that followed, a fragile new dynamic settled over the house. The Cold War thawed into an awkward, but genuine, truce. Mark used the insurance money to pay off the mortgage. A weight lifted so profound that the very house seemed to sigh in relief. He helped Maya with her application for the art program, surprised to find he had a keen eye for the logistical details she overlooked. With Elara, the battles ceased. They began to talk. Real conversations, not just negotiations or arguments. He learned about her dream of having her own art studio, not just doing commercial work. She learned about his childhood, his own complicated family, and the weight of command he carried. One evening, he found her in the living room, not working, but simply staring at a blank canvas she'd set up. "Art block?" he asked, handing her a cup of tea. She took it with a small, grateful smile. "More like life block. I haven't painted for myself in years. I'm not sure I remember how. Liam said you were brilliant." She looked at him, her expression soft. "He talked about you all the time, you know. Captain Rourke, the bravest man he knew. The man who always brought his boys home." Her voice caught. "He believed in you completely. I think I was angry because he put his faith in you, and not entirely in me." "It was never a competition," Mark said gently. "He had faith in you to keep the home fires burning. He had faith in me to keep him safe. They're two different kinds of faith, both necessary." She nodded, absorbing this. "I'm sorry," she said, the words quiet but clear, "for making this so hard for you. I'm sorry for thinking I could march in and take command of a situation I didn't understand," he replied. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Elara Walsh." Their eyes held, and the air in the room shifted, charged with something new, something warm and terrifyingly hopeful. The final test came from Chloe. She was being bullied at school for her military dad. Instead of retreating, she came to Mark. "They keep saying you're not my real family," she mumbled, staring at her shoes. Mark knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Family isn't always about blood, Chloe. It's about who shows up. It's about who stands in your corner. Your brother asked me to stand in your corner, and I'm not going anywhere." The next day, he drove her to school and walked her to the door, his posture straight, his presence unmistakable. He didn't say a word to the other kids, but his message was received. The bullying stopped. 6 months later, the house was filled with the smell of baking and the sound of laughter. It was Maya's send-off party before she left for New York. The walls, once a sterile white, now boasted several of Elara's new paintings. Vibrant, emotional, and full of life. Mark stood by the fireplace watching the scene. Maya was excitedly showing Chloe her new art supplies. Elara was laughing at something a friend said, her face relaxed and radiant. She caught his eye from across the room and smiled, a real, unreserved smile that lit up her whole face. Later, after the guests had left and the sisters had gone to bed, Elara found him on the back porch, looking up at the stars. "You did it, you know," she said, leaning against the railing beside him. "You kept your promise." "We did it," he corrected, turning to face her. "Together." The space between them hummed with all the unsaid things, all the shared battles and hard-won peace. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a brief second. "Mark," she whispered. "I'm not here because of a promise anymore, Elara," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm here because this is where I belong. With you. With them." He kissed her then under the starlight. It was not a kiss of conquest, but of coming home. It was a gentle, searching kiss that held all the grief of the past and all the promise of the future. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "Stay," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." He repeated his vow to Chloe, now making it a vow to her, to them, to the family they had built from the ashes of loss, a family forged not by blood or law, but by choice, by struggle, and by a love that had challenged its way into existence. In the quiet of the night, the captain had finally found his most important charge. Not a duty to be endured, but a home to be loved.